It's all true. Thanks for having me here. We have 18 weeks left on the job. As of this tonight, it'll be 17 weeks left on the job. So what I thought would be useful is to talk a little bit about how we're thinking about the arc, where this is going, how much has been covered, and really some of the things I would encourage all of you to think about if you were had the job that we have been fortunate enough to have for at least I've had for the last 2 years, and thinking about this. And you know, it is really true. It's really interesting for me because I'm back in this space and working on these problems. I originally got first exposed to the idea of using machine learning and medical, and looking at the early tachycardia here at MIT with Zach Kohani and my uncle and other people way back in, I think that was the mid 80s when that was first being done with the project with the data coming off the Mercy. So where do you start when you're thinking about this problem over the whole arc of the White House? I think one of the best things to do is just think about the time we live in, because there's this sort of narrative kind of going on in the world about you know, how bad things are, and you sort of ask, well, name a person or a country that wouldn't want to switch places with what we have and what has happened. And think about that arc over the last decade and what has changed. You know, 10 years ago, you know, phones were flip phones. You had to, you know, there was no keyboard except on the BlackBerry. Most things were like the QWERTY. You know, you had to type a thing, you'd have to press buttons really fast. You know, buying us shoes on the internet, that was a weird idea. You know, that carrying stacks of maps was a normal thing. As Pete said, 97% of medical records were, or 90% of medical records were all on paper. Paper meaning triplicate, not just single paper. That was the world we live in. You know, today, it's not what we have, it's what we expect. It's the expectation of the customer, of a person and a service. You know, it's custom, it's instant news. Not just having a map, but having real-time traffic, dynamic routing. The services start to adapt to how you interact with it. We have car service on demand, because if you don't have a car, people are now deciding that they don't want that. They would rather have it in flexible frameworks that are often mostly determined by allocation determined on data. The shipping, if you're going to get a package, it's not that you expect it to arrive, you expect it to arrive in a timely way. 1 day, less than a day, hours. Now that's the cycle we're on. And even this whole notion of the quantified self and all of the electronic data that is coming off us as individuals in the way we interact and work with the world. That's that kind of shift that we've seen in just a span of 10 years. And so what I would argue is we've seen this incredible revolution take place in our lifetime. And what's really powerful about this is that the next one is also taking place right now. Just as one looks like it's tailing off, there's another one that is substantially moving. And that one, of course, is data. And this is why this is so powerful and so important for this type of institute to really be doing the work that is. And what is this when we say data? Well, we talk about all of these things generically: the Internet of Things, genomic, precision medicine, data science, machine learning, AI, autonomous vehicles. I mean, these are now becoming ubiquitous topics. You know, there's the growth of the term of how people talk about data science, and we can talk about the story of how data scientists just sort of, it's been such a surprising growth of a title that people actually expect or want to have. But the thing that I want to tell you about this is, from the national perspective, is why do we actually even need this at the national perspective? Like, why have this? Because we have a rich history as a country doing really incredible things in this space. We have a census, we have incredible economics teams, economists are supporting that. What is that? What's the difference? Well, as the president looks across the landscape of these things, he sort of said, well, how do we bring these things together, especially in an increasing fragmented world, and institute data in this new genre through every aspect of our policy? And how do we utilize that as a force multiplier? And think about how radical that is for a second, because the president is a constitutional law professor. He's not a physicist, he's not a mathematician, he's a constitutional law professor. It really stems from his time in the election of seeing how email and data could really transform in getting the message out and galvanizing people and thinking. He said, well, why don't we just do that everywhere across in every single aspect we do of the government? If you ever have a chance to go to the Oval Office has, instead of dishware on the walls, it has replicas, actually not replicas, the actual submissions of patents, of scientific patents. Those are the gear cutter, the telegraph, things like that. So this president has seen what transformation can actually do and has asked that across. And so the mission that he has given us is to responsibly unleash the power of data to benefit all Americans. And in this, there are two words that are the most important and extremely carefully chosen: responsibly and all. And those have very different contexts depending on the problem. The thing, though, that I want to assert more than anything else is that we should think of a technology as neither radical nor revolutionary unless it benefits every single person. So that's an easy statement to make. It's a kind of top level one of these kind of statements. What does it actually look like when a technology is truly radical and revolutionary and is actually benefiting every single person? Let's take a look at a problem which doesn't appear healthcare related at first, but one we don't really like to talk about. But it's really timely in the news right now. Last night, periodically. It's our criminal justice system. It's our police relations. What is technology doing there? And so if we take a look at it just this year alone, how many people will go through our local jails? Anyone have an idea of an order of magnitude? About 10 million. 11.4 million people. How many jails? 3,100. Something wrong with that order of magnitude, right? How often will they stay there? How long is a typical stay in a jail? It's 23 days. How many of them actually go to prison? 95% of them will never go to prison. This is a cycling system. We are cycling people through this. Who pays for that? That is jail. It is not federal. It is local jail. That means you all pay for it. We all pay for it. Our future pays for it, because that is dollars that do not go to a teacher, a schoolyard, playground, infrastructure in the roads, another officer, firefighter. All that's getting sucked up just to cycle people. So where is that? What's going on in there? Let's look at one of the largest single facilities in our country, Cook County, Illinois. In the news a lot. It's 90 acres of jail. 90 acres of a jail. That's a campus, right? They can put on the scale of MIT. I think that's bigger. Actually, 90 acres might be bigger than MIT's primary, central campus. That's all jail. Who's in there? What's the surrounding area look like? Turns out, because it's a jail, who else gets penalized? You don't have cell phone coverage for miles around the jail. So this world that we think about of, amazing real-time car service and all maps and all this stuff, getting your electronic medical records in real time on your mobile phone, that doesn't exist for these people. They have none of that because they're near a jail. So you can't just think of that 90 acres as 90 acres. That's square miles. Inside there, 1/3 of all the inmates, 1/3 of all the inmates have a mental health issue. So we have a real problem with that. Where's the technology revolution for them? So I want to introduce you to Pete Early and Kevin Early. Pete is a pretty famous author. Kevin is his son. Kevin has a mental health issue. He is one of these people that has been cycling through this jail. He's one of those 11.4 million people going through those 3,100 jails. Just cycling. He has a mental health issue, gets busted, police him down. There's one incident where he had broken in, he got naked, was kind of acting it looked like a threat. An officer interacted with him. We've heard the narrative of what happens there. This case, the officer had been trained in crisis intervention. He said, recognize the signs. Instead of trying to take him out, what he did is he did tactical retreat, de-escalation, got him in the car. Hey, what music do you want to listen to? Got him to the right care center. That's one case. One case. How do we make that scalable? The scalable method of that is where technology comes in. Let's look at an example. Miami-Dade, Florida. They took at this and they said, hey, this is a problem. We think there's a problem here. So they did something totally remarkable and revolutionary. They looked at the data. Now you think that's like, it seems like it's a little weird, right? Like, well, shouldn't you be looking at the data? It's how they looked at the data. So inside the criminal justice system, they said, who are the people that we see a lot? And they created a list. We're not talking machine learning, AI. This is like a spreadsheet. Let's look at that list. And then they handed that list over to the healthcare side of the house. And they look at the healthcare side of the house and they say, have you seen any of these people? And you see these people a lot. And they said, hey, we have a spreadsheet too. Look, whoa, that's weird. They're all the same people. Camden, New Jersey, 70% of all the medical costs, 70% of the medical costs come from 10% of the population. All the same people. So they said, you know what, who are these people? All the mental health people, they got all these other issues. So they said, well, why are we paying for these people in this jail structure, the super expensive cost structure, the ERs? Let's get them some other way. Let's do some other intervention. So they got them, they trained the whole department, all dispatch, everyone in the police force in crisis intervention. Same thing that happened with Pete and Pete's son, Kevin. In the first year alone of doing that, they saved $10 million. They closed a full jail. That's that kind of data. We often think about the super, super sophisticated aspect of data. In this case, if we just do some of the simple things, there's radical savings. So what we have done is we've created the Data-Driven Justice Initiative, and what that does is it focuses on getting communities around the country to figure out how do you make this scalable. There's a lot of challenges in this. One is privacy. That's why the data actually moves from the criminal justice system to the healthcare system. Because if it moves that direction, one directional, it allows you the protections that come along with the data, responsibly using the data. Two is it also opens up the paradigm for the health ecosystem to have the intervention techniques and tactics that they are best equipped to deliver, and really figuring out how to get the social services involved. That's part of this portion, and it is something that is taking off incredibly fast around the country, and you'll be hearing a lot more about updates about this and how the scale and scope of this is going to happen over the next several weeks. Let's talk about the flip side, because this is once you have been incarcerated. What about that first interaction point with officers? What does that look like? What about this notion about interaction with police, use of low-level force, all that transparency? Well, the flip side of this is what I want to introduce you to is Grace Clark. Grace is 15 in this picture. That is the superintendent of police. It's like the chief of police for New Orleans. She is teaching him how to pull, his first line of code to pull data about his department. The thing I love about this picture, who's in power? Grace is in power. This is what a conversation about data looks like when you start to open up data, when you start to interact with data, because then the chief says, hey, shouldn't we have this data? And she says, no, you don't have that data, or the data doesn't look good. And he says, why doesn't it look good? And they start to ask, and they start to collect that data, and they start to use it in different ways. That's how that dynamic starts to happen. This is what we call the President's Police Data Initiative, and it gets police departments to open up their data to start asking these basic questions and looking at what they are. What are those types of data? Stop rates, use of force, disparities in the ethnicities, all of those type of things that are tied closely together in this. But there's more about this, because we often think about this and the power that this can do. A team of data scientists out of University of Chicago went down to a city in the South, and they started working with that department and started looking at their data. And they started using the basics of machine learning, feature set selection, to ask where are the causes and the features determining use of excessive force. When they did that, they found a whole bunch of the usual things. You have a track record of accidents, you have the usual things. But then they go down a list a little bit further, and they found two very interesting features. One of which is you responded to an incident of domestic violence where a child was present. The other one is you responded to a suicide. So it's like, well, what's going on there? So like good data scientists, they started doing the ride-alongs with the officers, and they go on these things. And I want you to put yourself in that moment of you're a police officer and you respond to a suicide. Suicides are extremely messy. They're physically messy. They're emotionally messy. So you've done this thing. You've taken all the reports. There's a lot of trauma going on. There's a lot of emotion. You call into dispatch, and you say, OK, we're done. What do they say? OK, get back out on the beat. You're out there on the beat, and somebody's got a busted tail out, and you pull them over, and they're flippant with you. Are any of us that good as humans to be able to handle that type of context shift? In that case, where is the data and the technology failing us? It's a dispatch system there. Why doesn't the dispatch system have some level of intelligence to say, like, hey, give the officer some time to decompress? Give them an option of how to think about the situation. So now they have started to take this layer and actually build this into dynamic dispatch to start thinking better. That's that component of where the data at the cursory level leads you down a path when interacting with the people to find the richness of actually how to make data as a force multiplier for that change. And those programs are starting to take off. There's equally the side that we can talk about the civil rights and all the other things of the ethics of data with some of these other type of programs, which are also important and critically in there. And these are all wrapped up into these programs as well, including risk-based assessments for bail and all of the sides on the judiciary. But I want to flip gears completely to the other side of this, is that we really have to ask this question of how do we make the technology work for us rather than against us? This is a line that the president talked about in the last State of the Union, is that it is always imperative that we ask who is the technology working for and who is this technology working against. We often talk when we're building about these things as, oh, that's an edge case. I want to tell you, every one of those edge cases, when we build these products at this level of an institution, that edge case is a human. That edge case is a group or a community. When you leave that edge case without just just glossing over it, you are providing an opportunity for the technology to work against a group. And what I encourage us to do is deeply ask, who are those groups? One of those groups is Jennifer Bittner. Jennifer, that's her husband Rod, that's her beautiful baby boy. Jennifer wrote into the president about her story. She has a very serious form of cancer. She's doing okay right now. But she wrote in because her life expectancy is purely determined by the rate at which science progresses. Now, that's sort of an obvious thing because of longevity, we think about it that way. But in this case, it's because she has this very serious form of cancer. So she's asking us to go faster. In fact, what she's talking about is the basis of when we ask what is holding back that kind of notion, what's holding back that progress. And oftentimes, what we're found in there of that solution is a database. Some data is there, it's locked up. In fact, what's worse, it's thousands of databases. And everyone here is going to talk about that too, I think, because it is one of the singular things is we can't get data. I mean, we had, walking down in the basement with a baseball behind our bat sort of as our incentive for them, right? The data is locked up. What happens if you bring that data together? That's what's sitting behind these ideas of the Precision Medicine Initiative. Bring together large volumes of data in a responsible way to allow researchers to interact with it. Try new things. Cancer Moonshot similarly allows that to happen. All of these things are the next paradigm where we have to go is to open up that data to allow ourselves to work with it and start really trying to play with that data and figure out what's going on. Wrapped up in that is a lot of policy, everything from things that are called the Common Rule to HIPAA to meaningful use to MACRA and all these other pieces. It's a very complex ecosystem. But there's one thing I can tell you at the end of this and all of these things is there's only one thing we have to focus on. One thing, and this is something the president always challenges us on, is who are the people? Like, oh, well, let me switch gears to that. Actually, I'm just going to go straight to this. Those are the things. But focus on the human. he always challenges us to focus on that human. I haven't shown you any graphs. I haven't shown you any data. There's no equations in here. Because at the end of the day, if we're focused on the use case of who these people are, we will do what's right by them. And we will always, always make sure the technology is working for us, not against us, and ensuring that the technology that at this level, which we know has the opportunity to be radical and revolutionary, truly benefits every single person. So thank you.